It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much to all you beautiful souls who just come questing and wanting to, get a little deeper about life. It's a bit of an adventure, isn't it, that we're on? So I gave a talk a few months ago, and that was the first time I'd ever given a public speech. I have to say I'm a little more relaxed the second time round, although the heart was going just there. So I was invited to give another speech, and at that time I was just really in this massive place of curiosity about my heart. And it's like it's a muscle, or it's kind of like a flower, it can open, it can close. Sometimes it's a bit more like an earthquake, seismic. But I was just really curious, so when I was asked if I wanted to do another talk, I said yeah. And I decided I'd do it on heartbreak as an aspect of life. And then I thought, oh, for God's sake, Annabel, that is the most ridiculous subject. Why don't you just do something, I don't know, like something I have studied loads about. This is more kind of amusing, philosophical subject. But anyway, here I am. So let's see what comes. So heartbreak is just a part of life. It seems like an obvious statement, and yet until you're actually feeling it, and our culture is not the best at having a clue how to hold each other in the wild reality of heartbreak, grief and loss. But yet when these states can be fully embodied, can be travelled through, they can have such profound vitality and they're part of life. We have to go through it. So, I will talk later on about kind of the effects of when we resist that. So it's emotion. Emotion is energy in motion. It's meant to be moving. And yet we can get very stuck. There's, huge issues of depression and, mental health problems, all sorts of things in our society. So let's unpack this a little bit. One of the things I was thinking about, I suppose, is heartbreak. When I'm saying it's a part of life, it's like there's almost kind of layers of it. And like when the speaker before, when Ria was talking about, porn, like seeing how that affects young people, that can be heartbreaking. That is an experience of heartbreak as an everyday part of life. And then there's, cataclysmic traumas that come along and can really affect us. There's a whole range. Right. Excuse me. I don't want to read my notes, but it's good to look at them every once in a while. Okay. So part of the problem is about that armouring on the heart. And the sad truth is it can take like huge tragedy to actually really crack through that armour. In my arena as a tantra teacher, we talk about this connection between sex, heart, and kind of connecting you with all that is, whatever you want to call that, spirit, the cosmos, humanity, the planet, whatever, but that kind of wider sense of connection. So in this ideal world, this flows. Our bodies are like vessels. Think of a baby in the womb. It's like a little fish, and we've got these kind of ripples that can flow through our body. And think about children when they're really small. Ideally, if you have a good, loving upbringing, children can really flow with their emotions. And it's beautiful to watch. They're like a babbling brook. This was nothing in what I'd written down. This is just coming. So, that one minute they can be really angry, and then they're, lost in awe and wonder. Then they're sad, and it flows. So we, on some level, were like that. We were like that. In fact, there was a little baby this morning in my baby boogie dance class who was tired, and then she banged her head, and this primal wail that came out of her, it was really powerful. It was really powerful. And, this is a little baby. I'm not saying we want to necessarily go around being like children with our emotions. Oh, there's one here. Hello. In the audience, a little squawk from the baby there. You see, they're so free with their expression. Yeah, so, you know, that somewhere in us there is this natural way to flow with emotion. Okay, so heartbreak as a way of life. I want to talk about just a couple of examples of heartbreak and how we can be with that. So a couple of years ago, a very beautiful, beloved friend of mine and of some people in this audience died, and it was profoundly tragic, and certainly for me, I'd never had that hit in my heart like that. It was a tsunami. It was just shock beyond shock. It was traumatic, and working out how to be with that in the world was a journey, a grief journey. And I didn't know it. It was new to me. And as someone who's very curious about the body and feeling things in the body, it was like, oh my God, what is this? You know, the mind was working overtime. But what happened was, you know, every once in a while, the waves would come, and it was just out of this world. The pain, the kind of existential angst, it was heart-wrenching rawness, and I could not do it without friends who could actually witness that and hold that. So I feel really grateful and blessed that I had that in my life. And I could travel that river. And my heart could grow, actually. The grief in some way never goes, but the heart grows. So that's something I definitely learned through that and continue to learn. Then here's another example, a bit more, not to do with trauma, but to do with the heart and love. So I have a lover, and this lover doesn't live local, and he travels all over the world, so we hardly see each other. And when we see each other, it's great, it's beautiful. And then we have these gaps, and it's a bit, you know, like, my heart, how does this function here? So there was this one particular night, and I was missing him so profoundly. So with my whole body, it was like tendrils were coming out of my body, trying to reach around the world to find union with him, which was quite painful and wasn't actually going to maybe happen. So, you know, maybe there's fantasy in there as well, I don't know. But whatever it was visceral in the body. And then somehow, you know, it was a beautiful evening, it was a magical evening that I went through with this, of feeling that, and then the tears and the longing, the yearning, but somehow it all came back into my body as love, as just love here, like in the moment, with my body, with my own passion and desire, and I could own it all. And it was just you know, I just rode this river of feeling that aching yearning right through to finding that kind of sense of beloved within, and through the tears, finding the pleasure. So that's kind of everyday heartbreak, you could say, riding that river. Let's have a look, what else have I got here? Yeah, so, you know, I want to talk, it's interesting actually, because other speakers this evening have spoken about this already this evening, but we have a big, there's a lot of loss in our society. We've got some issues, we've got some big issues. We have high suicide rates, so many people are depressed and feeling trapped in their lives, blighted coping mechanisms to deal with the pain. Drugs, alcohol, you know, all these addictions, shopping, sex, you name it. And they all of those coping mechanisms, those kind of blighted coping mechanisms, use the same brain process. High levels of dopamine, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it, maybe both ways, to distract from what you don't want to face. And people, you know, working really hard to hold it together in this struggle, you know. I know this is the sex lectures, but actually this is life, you know. Life is about connection, and if we're struggling, we can't connect with other people. And then there's this idea as well in our modern society of immediate happiness, like, oh, we'll just get something. I mean, addictions meet that need in the Tinder generation. You know, I was actually messaging someone only recently the other day who said they wanted nothing heavy, just good banter and great sex. It's like, I'm not a switch. You can't just flick me on like that. I need to connect, and I need to connect with the heart, even if it's kind of casual. So anyway, I was talking with a dear friend the other day who has been through great heartbreak. She lost her husband, who she'd been with for 37 years. So I rang her up to have a chat about this talk. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to her is because she's been so public with her grief. She shares these posts on Facebook, and every time she shares them, it's like everyone's heart is touched because she's so raw with what she shares. I know you can think of Facebook as an impersonal arena, but it can be, it can be really deep and meaningful, a place to connect as well. But she was saying that actually, in her experience, when she shared those things, although she really needed to, she still felt that shame. Like, oh God, have I been too much? Because the experience of grief is that we're not necessarily held. We're not necessarily held, and the reality is that if we express those deep, raw, messy emotions, it can be a bit too much for people. It causes discomfort. So what I want to talk about now is like, what happens if we don't do that? So, and I want to talk about epigenetics. So epigenetics is the study of changes in organisms caused by modification of gene expression rather than alteration of the genetic code itself. So essentially it's about grief and kind of unexpressed feelings, trauma often, that have not, for whatever reason, been able to come to the surface, and they're held in the body. Remember, emotion is energy in motion. If it doesn't go into motion, it's held in the body. If we carry intergenerational trauma, then we also carry intergenerational wisdom. It is in our genes and in our DNA. We have the capacity, whatever has happened to us, to move through. So I want to talk about just a few of the ways through, basically. There's a teacher who I really admire. I've actually only recently come across her. She's called Joanna Macy. Some of you might know her. She's a deep ecologist. And, her thing is very much about, she runs these workshops to help people to be more empowered, to really bring themselves through into life. But what she also says is you've got to feel the feelings, because we have a real tendency to kind of put our head in the sand about the tricky stuff. So as part of her workshops, people embody and express their anger, their fear, their grief, and their loss. And there's something about that being shared in a group space that is profoundly healing and empowering a way to be witnessed. The witnessing is really, really important. And then through that, finding that place to, connect more with heart purpose, life purpose. I mean, I spoke before a bit about this idea of us, our energy, so kind of doing body work that helps release the blockages in our bodies is just incredibly important. We don't have to do this with our head. We don't have to think it through. We can do body work. We can just work with this gate here, your hip gate, your heart gate, like literally here, and your neck. And then as we release and kind of come more into flow, emotions will get released through the body. So with all this talk of grief, I think it's really important to talk about love. We only feel heartbreak because we're loving so deeply. And I take great inspiration, and teachers out there in the world of mine often come from indigenous backgrounds. One teacher I particularly admire is called Martin Prechtel. He's Google him if you don't know his work. He's a Mayan shaman, and he's a profound, eloquent soul. And one of the things he says here is, when we first meet what we love, we could become poets of our longing. When we are removed from that, we become singers of grief and weavers of elegant description. So in his culture, the whole life is about grief and praise, praising the innate wonder of this life and all the creation as part of the everyday. And then, when that's lost, being able to express that with passion, that irrational, messy state is held by the community. So I've had the Time's Up sign, so I'm going to bring it to a close. And what I'm just going to say is that what we need is to have hope that with each other, that we can be that place of contact, of real relationship, that we can see each other, look another in the eyes, hold them, touch them, the simplest ways. You know, I was talking to a friend the other day, she was dropping her son off at school and there was all these parents with 4-year-olds in tears. She just went up and touched them and just looked them in the eye and said, yeah, I know that's really hard, and you know, if they wanted, gave them a hug. That's just everyday kindness that helps that emotion go through. Anything else? I know I've got to finish. It's a big subject, you know. Yeah, so grief is not just an emotion, it's a faculty that we have neglected in this culture. So when grief arrives at our doorstep, we haven't a clue how to let it into the house. Life will surely bring us grief, so let us be apprentices to sorrow, so that grief will ripen us. And all these images that were going on in the background, that a lot of them are just expressions of the grief, the way the indigenous people show that. So may we remember that indigenous in our own bones. Bring it back. Thank you.